Hi, this is Rob Warlow, the business finance coach and owner of Business Loan Services. Welcome to this weekly Friday Business Finance Bulletin. As usual, a quick roundup of some news and some views about what's going on in the SME finance world. So let's crack straight on with it. Now, the first thing I was looking at this week was a report and survey carried out by YouGov, and it had a look at SMEs and its relationship with banks and finance. An interesting finding from there. And banks have always said, we want to lend money, but many business owners don't want to borrow. And obviously people are just saying that's just rubbish, it's just an excuse on behalf of the banks. But this survey did come up with one interesting aspect, which found that 64% of SMEs said they don't want to borrow money and haven't done so over the last 2 years. So that kind of validates where the banks are coming from. Almost 2/3 saying they don't want to borrow. Now, the survey had a look at, what is the reason? Why don't they want to borrow? 34% of them said that they didn't want to borrow money because they just wanted to concentrate on getting their existing debt levels down. Probably over-borrowed during the boom days and just want to concentrate on deleveraging. So that's okay. The next one, 21% of business owners said they didn't want to borrow because they were fearful of the general economic climate, really weren't sure where the economy is going, so playing it safe. And 11% of them said the reason they didn't approach banks is because they assumed they were going to get a no, so what was the point? Now, we've looked at this issue in previous blogs and videos about having a negative mindset when it comes to dealing with banks. Don't make that assumption that they will say no. Another thing that they had to look at was that only 36% of business owners are aware or used alternative sources of finance, whether that be crowdfunding, asset finance, invoice discounting, factoring, HP, whatever it may be. More of you need to be getting out there and looking at those alternative sources. So, last week I mentioned that I was going to Amsterdam last weekend. I was presenting for a guy called Kevin Green. He was running a 3-day business building and finance workshop for Dutch entrepreneurs. So I went over, spent the weekend there and did 2 sessions. The first session on Saturday morning was all about raising finance, dealing with banks and insider tips on how to get that yes. And the session I did on the Sunday morning was just some general business building tips, particularly looking at 7 key issues that business owners need to overcome. Now, it was a great weekend, and interestingly, Dutch entrepreneurs face the same issues in raising finance as do British entrepreneurs. Usual things. Banks have got a little bit of a negative mindset and maybe a bit risk averse. But interestingly, they've got a very vibrant and growing crowdfunding sector. So we spent some time looking at that. So I got a quick clip from that session on the Saturday morning, where just a little bit about setting the scene about what was to come during the rest of that session that I did. So have a look at that clip. I'll join you in a minute and I'll finish off my coffee and I'll join you in about a minute and a half or so. I talked to many businesses and they say, Rob, I'm not looking for finance at the moment. I want to wait until things get back to normal. Normal being that period, 2000 to 2007, yeah? But that wasn't normal. That was the abnormal period. Now is normal. This is how it always should have been. Now it's been a bit tough. It's gone to the extreme, but this is the new normal. That period, 2000 to 2007, was the abnormal period when the world went mad. And I speak to many business owners and say they want things to get back to normal, and it's not going to happen. So we have to adjust ourselves to the new reality, which is today, and say we have to learn all these new skill sets. Managing finance is probably the biggest skill gap that many business owners have. I was reading a survey carried out by a bank in New Zealand last year, and it wrote to all of its customers and just said, we're trying to assess what skills you've got. And it gave them a range of skills and asked them to rate themselves on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being poor, 10 being great, on how they rated themselves on these skills. And perhaps not surprisingly, handling customers and customer care, many businesses on average rated themselves 8 out of 10. But the one skill that came up the lowest was finance. And on average, people gave themselves 6 out of 10. Now, to be honest, I'm a bit surprised at 6 out of 10. With what I see, that's a bit generous. But it was the lowest skill that people rated themselves on was finance and understanding. Hey, welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed that clip and found it useful. Well, what else have I been up to? Well, since I came back, I've had a couple of catch-up meetings with bankers. I met some bankers from Barclays, Lloyds and Santander, just part of a regular catch-up just to see what's going on in the world of finance from a bank's perspective. And interestingly, to a man, all of them said they have never been so busy. So clearly things are picking up. And just remember the previous point that I said about assuming that the banks are going to say no. If they do have an appetite for doing business, but, and here's the but, you have to be a strong, solid business, get the business plans in place, all financial information up to date. So what's my tip for this week? My tip is about late payment. This week, Experian, the credit reference agency, issued their latest quarterly late payment index survey, where they go out to their client base and just ask for feedback on business owners' experience where it comes to collecting debts. Now, if you're dealing with large businesses, and they're defined as businesses that have got 501 employees or more, on average, they are taking about 35 days over and above agreed terms in order to pay. So if your terms with them are 30 days, they're taking another 35 days on top. So just over 2 months in total to get paid. Now that's a big, big cash gap to try and fund. Now, if you're dealing with smaller businesses, the small end of the market, they're a little bit better. They are paying 20 days over and above agreed terms. So again, if you've got 30-day terms, they tend to be paying in total 50 days from days of invoice. Now, that's tough. And it's one of the reasons why business owners approach banks for overdraft facilities, is to bridge this gap. So what can you do? So my tips for today is about all around managing late payment. So the first thing, have a written credit management policy in place, which really sets the scene internally within the business about this is how we do it round here. So get everything written down about what your process is. Second one, issue your invoices early and bang on time. Get them out as soon as the job is finished. Don't wait until the end of the week or month end to do all your invoicing. Keep your cash flow regular by invoicing regularly. Ring up then to make sure that the customer has received the invoice. And then, say 3 days before the payment is due, give them a call again just to remind them that payment is due. Once you get over terms, then you can start sending regular emails, a harsher tone about saying, where's the money? Now, one of the biggest problems that small business owners face is this contradiction, this dilemma about this dual role that we have. One is about bringing in business and being warm and cuddly with our clients, but then on the other hand, you're expected to be very tough when it comes to chasing the debt. So you're a bit of a conflict. So my tip here is outsource it. Get your bookkeeper, your accountant, or somebody else within the business or family member, whatever it may be, to pick up the phone and have the nasty conversations about chasing payment. That's not down to you. Maintain a good, strong relationship with your client. Let someone else have the difficult conversations if you're not comfortable with that. So there we are. I hope that helps. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Check in again next Friday, and I look forward to sharing more tips with you then. Have a great weekend and a great week. Catch you next week.